there is plenty of livestock out there. Like I said, the problem is we need labor to make it from beef steer to beef steak. And I think somehow Farm Bureau can be a way of conveyance of, there's a lot of things that happen before your stuff gets to the grocery store. I'm wondering if I'm going to have an outlet for my cattle. You know, the thing that I've related to is there's plenty of food out there, but the problem is if I drop a 1,300 pound steer off in your front yard, yes, you have meat, but you don't have meat. And the processing thing is what concerns me, the fact that we need labor for processing.
Welcome back to Farmside Chat. This is Zippy Duvall, President of American Farm Bureau, and I'm your host for today. I'm looking forward to our conversation today, and as we go through day-to-day life experiencing the COVID-19 virus and pandemic, we are also facing a lot of social distancing issues, but there are issues facing our families and our farmers across America that we're going to talk about today. As our friends and neighbors go to the grocery store, they're experiencing shelves that are not completely full that we've been used to all our lives, but wondering whether or not there's going to continue to be enough food for us all. And our farmers each and every day are getting up, going out to the barns and the fields, doing what they do best, doing it now just like they always did. And we know that there's a lot of food out there, and we're discovering that there are some weaker links in this food chain that we take so much pride in. But hopefully there'll be a lot of things that we learn in this experience about our food chain here in America. But today we're going to talk about how it has affected our markets and also how it's affected our farmers on the farm. Okay, welcome back to Farmside Chat. This is Zippy Duvall, President of American Farm Bureau, and the host for today. I want to thank you for joining us and looking forward to the conversation. I know everyone has been exercising the social distancing recommendations from our federal government, and all the time along our farmers are still out there farming, trying to take care of their families, their communities, and all the wonderful people that work for us each and every day. So with me today I have two special guests. First off, we have Michael Nepveux, who is one of the economists we have working with us at American Farm Bureau. And we also have Peter Bakken, who is a farmer in Minnesota. Peter, in Minnesota, are you a ranch or a farm? In Georgia, we're a farm.
Well, we can go both ways because we have livestock, which I guess would make us a rancher, and we also do dirt farming too. And I guess in Minnesota, we would be considered farmers.
Okay, well, that's what I have livestock here too, and I still consider myself a farmer. I got asked the other day what the difference was between a rancher and a farmer, and I said it just depends on how far west you are.
I would say that's a fair statement.
That's right. So I'm going to start off with Michael. Michael, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about your background, what brought you to Farm Bureau?
Sure. So originally I'm from Texas, and to clarify, we are far enough west to where we call them ranchers instead of farmers where I'm from small town, cow-calf country called Brenham, Texas. So claim to fame is if you ever had Bluebell ice cream, that's made in my hometown. But went through college at Texas A&M, always been just fascinated by agricultural economic side of things, understanding how these markets work and what makes them tick, and worked in the private industry for a number of years before making my way to Farm Bureau. And part of what drew me to Farm Bureau is that direct producer interaction that I grew up around, but wasn't really getting so much at my last job. So excited to be working at Farm Bureau and to be working for and on behalf of America's farmers and ranchers.
Well, thank you, Michael, and we're proud to have you on our staff at American Farm Bureau. You've done some tremendous work, and I know we'll talk a little bit about some of the work that you do here a little bit later. Now I'm going to go back to Peter Bakken, who is
farmer slash rancher in Minnesota. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Peter, and tell us a little bit about your farm and ranch.
Well, good afternoon, President Duvall, and it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm honored to be on the show today. I live in southwest Minnesota, so far southwest that I live a half a mile from the South Dakota border, so I guess in some respects I am far enough west that a rancher would probably be an appropriate name, but for the most part, I farm with my brother Jay, and we are fourth generation. We predominantly are in the beef business. I consider ourselves to be conception to consumption. We run about 250 mother cows that are calving right now, and we feed about 4,000 head of cattle per year. So we can take our own raising and do some things that maybe other people that are just in the feeding business don't. But we took over from my father. Like I said, we're fourth generation. We farm corn, soybeans, alfalfa, and do some cover crops, and predominantly the crops that we raise go to feed the cattle that are on our farm.
Thank you, Peter. I hope to get up to see you someday when up in that community, but I want to come in the summertime when it's warm.
Well, next time you're at Farm Fest, you can just swing on down and we'll show you around. The door's always open.
We'll make sure and do that, Peter. So, Michael, we know that the farm economy and the markets have not been immune to the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially the last few weeks, we've seen what's happened with beef, and now we're seeing some plant closures, or where they're processing proteins, whether it be pork or beef or chicken, and what that might do. Tell us a little bit about why you think we see the swings or the differences in the beef price from the farmer to the shelf in the store, and some of the work you've done in that area.
Okay, this might be a little bit of a long answer because I feel like there's a lot to unpack in that question, but I think there are multiple kind of parallel competing storylines going on right now. One being what you see happening on the demand side of things at the consumer level, and then one thing at the demand side of things at the packer level, and some of the struggles that they're having in keeping those plants open and maintaining as a market for fed cattle to go into. So starting, a little bit further down, I think you hit it right on the head. Farmers are seeing prices drop like crazy, while you're seeing the beef cutout skyrocket, and the spread between those two just keeps getting wider and wider. Part of what's driving that, I think, is, at least on the beef side of things, that panic buying that you saw consumers doing at the start of this COVID thing. You saw consumers go in and stock up on things like ground beef, chicken thighs, a lot of economical cuts going into freezers, and it was just a huge shock to the system. Particularly on the beef side, you have consumers sheltering in place, no longer going out to restaurants, no longer going out and eating those hamburgers, which is one of America's favorite meals. And there's a lot of ground beef that was going through those food service channels. And this isn't something that you can necessarily just snap your fingers and flip a switch and move all of the product that was going into those food service sectors and easily take that and put it into the retail level, which is what the consumer is trying to get their food from now. Additionally, beef in particular has specific challenges, I think, in the current environment, and that it was a little bit more exposed to that food service and restaurant sector than, say, pork was. They all have a pretty significant share going into the food service and restaurant, but beef in particular just had a lot more exposure there. In addition, anytime you start seeing recessionary pressures on an economy, animal proteins tend to struggle a little bit, because we're seeing in a situation where consumers are losing their paychecks. Many people are losing their jobs, and they look to cut where they can. And beef, in my opinion, is a necessity, but economically speaking, you call it a luxury product relative to things like chicken and pork. It's a little bit more expensive. And when consumers are at the grocery store, they have less dollars in their pocket, and they're trying to make it stretch a little bit longer. They're going to buy a little bit less beef. And I think you saw that drop in futures prices. A lot of that is forward looking to maybe when we come out of this COVID thing, we might have a pretty struggling economy, and a lot of people, again, losing those paychecks, it's a little bit thinking ahead that beef is going to struggle on the demand side of things.
Well, that was a long answer, but it was a very thorough one.
Sorry about that.
As a beef farmer, I'm a cow-calf guy, Peter, and I know you cow-calf and you're a feeder too. That is not good news. That's not what we want to hear as farmers, and it's going to make our future very difficult too. So, Peter, can you tell us what kind of effect it's already had on your operation and what your expectations are in the future with what's happened?
Well, I would agree with some of the things that Michael had to say with regard to beef being a little bit of a luxury item. That has been kind of one of the things that's been a concern for me is what's this thing going to look like on the backside? Are we, like I said, my concern is that we're not going to have consumers that have any money. The thing that is currently happening right now, we're in an environment right here where our marketings for our feeder cattle will start here in the next couple of weeks. And as I watch the processing plants have issues, that's my major concern. I'm wondering if I'm going to have an outlet for my cattle. The thing that I've related to is there's plenty of food out there, but the problem is if I drop a 1,300-pound steer off in your front yard, yes, you have meat, but you don't have meat. And the processing thing is what concerns me, the fact that we need labor for processing. So things are kind of status quo here right now, but the nervousness that we've got with the upcoming marketings is what makes me really concerned about what's going to happen to my operation, in addition to what the market price has already currently done and the disparity between what retail price is versus what wholesale price is that I'm getting.
Yeah, and what the consumer really doesn't understand is what they're paying at that store, even if it's a higher cost than what before we had the virus going around. That money's not making it back to our farmers. If someone that's removed from agriculture, they may think this might be a windfall for us, but that's not exactly what's happened. So, Michael, in the long term, what do you think will happen? And I know that's kind of looking into a crystal ball, and we don't really know what's going to happen on the processing side, but what do you think might happen?
Well, let me break out the crystal ball and see if I can guesstimate moving forward into the future. Long term is, I think the economy is going to come out of this. I wouldn't pretend to be able to tell you exactly how quickly, if that's going to be a stair step, if it's going to be, we keep talking about hopefully it's a V where it's been a sharp drop off. Everybody wants it to be a sharp increase in economic activity. But regardless of how that slope is, I think long-term animal proteins are a pretty bullish story. Before this happened, 2020 was looking at being a record production year for beef, pork, and chicken in the U.S. But, on the beef side of things, we are also looking at really strong demand, especially because the economy was doing well. Once we get back to doing well again, consumers on a per capita basis have been consuming more beef. They've been flocking to the just high quality eating experience that tends to come with beef. And I think long-term animal proteins in general stand to benefit, and I think beef especially on top of that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I don't know if you know this, Peter, but I'm also a poultry producer here in Georgia. And so we look at chickens coming in and out every 9 weeks. And now they're telling us the freezers are getting full at the plants. They sell a lot of the plant that I sell to. Most of that goes to fast food, and of course their restaurant part is closed down, and they can't do the volume through the drive-thrus that they've done in the past. We're probably facing some days that's going to come up where we're going to have houses empty longer than normal because the product's not being moved out. It's unfortunate that there's a lot of food out there, but we have discovered that food chain has some weak links in it. And hopefully that we'll all be learning where those weak links are so that we can be better prepared. Hopefully nothing like this will ever happen again, but we could be better prepared if something does happen like this. Have you got a perspective from a farmer, Peter, of what you think the weak links are and what we might do to shore them up?
Well, I think, just being part of an organization like Farm Bureau, that's a general organization that tries to advocate for all aspects of things. The other day when we were on the call, you were talking about just reaching out to Walmart and saying, don't limit the gallons of milk that are going out the door because we've got plenty of milk. We need to keep the demand up. So, I guess with reference to Michael and the V and whatnot, I'm hoping that once people get back to work and have some money in their pockets, I think for the sheer lack of socialization that society has had, once we get some dollars back in our pocket, I would agree with him as far as in beef in particular. People are going to want to go out and have a steak and that type of thing. But I still think the weak link, I'm 25 miles from Smithfield and I'm watching the pork industry just overnight say, wow, I've got hogs in the barn that need to go next week and my processor isn't here. So it's not that there is a lack of pork, it's the fact that we can't get it, in my case, to go from beef steer to beef steak. That link in the middle is truly the weak link because we need employees, we need people to turn beef steer into beef steak. So that's been my concern from the get-go, is even though the processing industry is critical, if you've got nobody that can show up to work, that's your weak link.
I agree with that, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about why those plants are closing. Some of it is that they have had positive tests there, and the rest of it is they have employees that are scared to show up for work once they have those positive tests. So it's kind of all over the board, and of course our first focus has to be on public health and making sure the people that work in those plants and work on our farms or have the same understanding and opportunity to protect themselves and their families, and that's our number one focus on each and every day. But as a farmer, it makes it very difficult for us to talk about it. So I could answer this question, Peter, but since you're my guest, I'm going to put it to you. I'm a consumer. Why can't you just feed that cow a little bit longer and wait until the plants open back up? I mean, can't that just happen?
Well, just from an animal welfare standpoint, an animal is built or engineered to get to a certain size, and muscle is generally what we're putting on so that we make the size ribeye that you want or the size rounds that you want. But once that animal continues to put pounds on, typically those pounds are no longer muscle mass, they're more fat. So as an animal gets larger, it maybe even gets uncomfortable to carry that much weight. I mean, physically an animal is built to carry only so much weight. Economically, that animal, it takes more dollars. As you put the dollars in, your return, since you're wanting lean red meat, gets to be less and less because that animal is just putting on fat. And then the economics of that is when it goes to the processing plant. Processing plant is only designed to handle animals that are a certain size. So the processing plant says, I don't want your animals because they're too big, because the extra fat that it has put on over time is something that the processing plant has to trim off, and it's called trim. And a lot of times that trim has either no value or significantly less value. So the dollars that I've spent to put extra pounds on, I no longer am getting any return for. So it's a liability both to myself and to the processing plant because they're not getting the red meat that they want to put on the grocery store shelf.
As I look back on our conversation, there's a lot of things that agriculture is facing today, and we've probably talked more about animal agriculture in the last 2 weeks than we have in the 4 years that I've been here, because normally it runs pretty smoothly, unlike some of the grains and the fruits and vegetables. But I think this pandemic, unfortunately, has given our country the opportunity to have an insight on how important healthcare is and the people that work in and around healthcare, and how important our food system is, and how dependent we are on it each and every day. It's our food and our healthcare system we've taken for granted for years and years and years, because that's what we expected to happen. But when it gets interrupted or kind of get a kink in it like we have in the last 2 months, I think it makes us really appreciate what's important in life, and we all have to eat and we all have to take care of ourselves.
The one thing that did show up in the newspaper in Sioux Falls was when they finally decided to close Smithfield indefinitely. There was a quote in the paper, and I don't know if I could find it or not, but the quote was, "I don't see why they didn't shut down Smithfield sooner anyway. Everybody knows that your pork chops come from the grocery store." And I mean, it's that, I always get concerned about us farmers being complainers, but that's kind of a little bit of the nature of the job, or the business. But the good things that have kind of been on my campaign trail here is just consumer awareness. This is a perfect opportunity for us to say to the consumer that there is plenty of livestock out there. Like I said, the problem is we need labor to make it from beef steer to beef steak. And I think somehow Farm Bureau can be a way of conveyance of, there's a lot of things that happen before your stuff gets to the grocery store. However, on the flip side, I had a gal tell me one time, she said, "I know my food comes from someplace other than the grocery store, but because it's there when I go to the grocery store and I can afford it and I don't have to worry about it making me sick, I don't think any further than the grocery store." So, there's those kinds of things that, we could sit here all day and talk about all this stuff, but I do think there's opportunity in this time of turmoil to make the consumer aware of what's going on out here.
Peter, you've given us a lot of your time in the last 2 weeks. You was on a press conference with me. We were on there for about an hour and a half with about 90 reporters around the country. I appreciate you giving up your time to do that. Appreciate your leadership in the Farm Bureau there in your state. Y'all have a great state Farm Bureau. And for the commercial you did a little while ago about Farm Bureau, you're exactly right. Farmers need to understand the value that they have in an organization like Farm Bureau, because while you're at the barn and while everyone else is in the field working around the country, people like Michael there is at American Farm Bureau working for them each and every day, making sure that the farmer's voice is getting heard at all the important levels. So we're hoping that our listeners are with their families today, taking care of their families and their communities, hoping that they're hearing some of the explanations of what's going on in and around agriculture, try to go back to their normal buying patterns so the food system can work in a way that everybody gets what they need to keep them healthy. And I know that we're all thinking out of the box, trying to figure out how do we do things differently, even to the suggestion of the Secretary creating a voucher system to maybe work with the food banks to be able to have more food in the food banks and work directly with our farmers. As farmers, we have a job to do, and that's to go out there every day and continue to do what we do, because there are so many people dependent on us.
We've had a great conversation today with Peter and Michael, and I thank them for being part of the Farmside Chat today. And we've had discussions about consumers and pricing and how it's affecting our farms. And we're looking forward to finding solutions to some of the problems that we're facing in agriculture today. But as we move forward, we want to make sure that everybody's focused on what's important. What's most important is the safety of our friends and our families and our communities. Let's all keep our distance. Let's do what the federal government is recommending to us to do. Let's get through this sooner than later, and let's come out the other side stronger. And we're all in this together, and we will be a stronger country and a stronger industry. Thank you for joining me today. If you have concerns or questions or suggestions, please call us and let us know what those are. And we hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless you.